Please adjust.
Welcome back. Trustee Carney, will you please convene the Committee on Campus Planning, Building and Grounds?
Thank you, Chair Kimbell. Will the meeting of the Committee on Campus Planning, Buildings and Grounds please come to order? We have 2 items on the consent agenda today. Is there any committee member that would like to remove from consent either of these 2 items? Seeing none, we'll take a vote on the approval of those 2 items. If you object to the approval, would you please indicate that? Seeing no objection, the consent agenda is approved. We have 1 item on the discussion agenda. It is the preliminary multi-year capital program, and it will be presented by Steve Relier, the Executive Vice Chancellor and Chief Financial Officer, as well as Vi San Juan, the Assistant Vice Chancellor for Capital Planning, Design, and Construction. Steve?
Thank you, Chair Carney. This item provides information to the Board of Trustees on the development of the university's multi-year capital program. Now, in the current economic climate and considering the budget realities at both the state and the federal level, we anticipate limited future funding for the capital program for CSU. However, our budget request to the state will include an ongoing increase to our support budget for capital outlay to ensure that we can meet the needs of our students, our faculty, and our staff. Staff at the Chancellor's Office and on the campuses have been working collaboratively to develop the preliminary multi-year capital program that we're talking about today. The web link and list of projects can be found in the agenda item itself. The capital plan reflects the current and future needs of the CSU to support the delivery of the academic program. So going back to 2014, the Board of Trustees has relied since then on a long-range vision of capital financing, looking for strategic ways to fund the implementation of the capital plan. The legislature in 2014 increased the board's authority to finance academic projects, and this strategy has helped to improve the quality and operational reliability of our roughly 42 million square feet of state-supported space. The state's prior increases to our base budget and the use of tuition fee revenues has been key to implementing this plan. We were also successful in pursuing legislation that gives us greater authority on CSU investments with the goal to direct the increase in earnings to deferred maintenance and capital projects. So as a reminder, this is an information item to share our progress on funding facilities deficiencies, provide an update on the multi-year capital program development, and solicit the trustees' input. We will come back to you at the November meeting for approval of the final plan. So with that, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Assistant Vice Chancellor Vi San Juan. Vi?
Thank you, Steve. Good afternoon, trustees. This slide identifies the funding sources for the capital program, which totaled $5.9 billion since 2014. The primary fund source has been system-wide revenue bonds, as shown in the dark blue. Of the $3.5 billion in system-wide revenue bond financing, 62%, or $2.1 billion, has been directed to the academic program since 2014. Interest rates are at record lows, and in August, the CSU sold approximately $1.3 billion in system-wide revenue bonds, and of that amount, $815 million was issued to finance new projects at long-term rates well below 3%. 2.52% were tax-exempt debt and 2.96% for taxable debt. And the remaining amount of $494 million was issued primarily to refinance existing system-wide revenue bond debt to lower interest rates, generating cash flow savings in the 2021 fiscal year of $15.6 million. So a lot of credit to our financing and treasury department under Robert Eaton's leadership. This pie chart also reflects another strategy to promote reinvestment into our facilities, and that is the green area that represents the university reserves used to fund or co-fund renovation and improvement projects. The other sources include state appropriations for deferred maintenance in light blue, followed by public-private partnerships in red, and the yellow area that represents a mix of donor, auxiliary, and grant funds. All of these fund sources are key to providing an effective teaching, learning, and working environment. Looking forward to the multi-year plan beginning in 2021 to 2022, we have received input from campuses regarding their needs. This year's plan includes a total of $23 billion, including critical infrastructure, modernization and renovation of existing buildings, and growth to serve increased enrollment. Of the $23 billion, projects totaling $3.7 billion are included in the first year of the plan and includes improvement projects for the academic program, as shown on attachment A, in addition to campus deferred maintenance projects. You will hear from Assistant Vice Chancellor Ryan Storm later today on the development of the preliminary operating budget. He will propose the inclusion of $10 million in our base operating budget request to pay for debt service for facilities projects. Based on current interest rates, we are estimating the $10 million would finance about $180 million in projects. There are tremendous needs across the CSU, but we believe the modest request for an increase in state funds is reasonable given the state's uncertain economic condition and the failure of Proposition 13 that would have provided state general obligation bond funding to schools and higher education. As in previous years, this year's plan includes an extensive list of infrastructure improvement projects provided by each campus. Priority for the capital program includes projects that address campus resilience, utility systems, and technology to support both physical and virtual environments. The multi-year capital program will support the board's priorities to reinvest in existing infrastructure and increase utilization of existing facilities. In the next few weeks, we'll continue to work with each campus to refine the budget, scope, and schedule of the projects in the preliminary plan. The plan was submitted to the Department of Finance and the Joint Legislative Budget Committee on September 1st for their review and comment. The final program will be presented to the board in November. We'll continue to evaluate our administrative process to identify streamlining opportunities. And given the $23 billion need identified by the campuses and the possible preliminary proposal to seek funding for $180 million, we'll propose in November that the board's approval of the capital program cover multiple years. This aims to be more efficient and effective at a time when resources are stretched thin throughout the system. And although this is a slight change from what you're accustomed to seeing, we think it will benefit the campuses by reducing the project planning workload and approval process. I'll turn it back to Steve to conclude the item.
Thank you, Vi. So as we seek funding for our capital needs, we're maintaining what has become a four-pronged strategy. To begin with, funds available from the multi-year financing plans approved by the board in November of 2016 and November of 2018 have been largely allocated to ongoing and future projects. So we're seeking a $10 million operating budget base increase to fund or finance academic facilities needs, and we'll talk about that more in Ryan Storm's presentation that's coming up this afternoon. Next, we'll continue to work with campuses on the use of their designated balances to co-fund deferred maintenance and improvement projects depending on the financial outlook of the campus. Third, we'll also use interest earnings from the recently developed total return portfolio to fund facilities projects. The board may recall that this new program resulted in $22 million in earnings that was allocated to campus projects recently. And last is the potential for a one-time funding request to address our backlog of deferred maintenance. As shown in the earlier pie chart, the increase in CSU's authority to issue debt for the academic program has made the most significant impact to improving the safety, reliability, and function of our existing buildings. That has enabled CSU to target areas of growth to serve student demand and finance these improvements by expanding the system-wide revenue bond program. So as we conclude, funding for renewal is an ongoing requirement which comes down to being proper stewards of our public facilities. In these austere times, we must continue to engage in capital improvements to support infrastructure needs, take advantage of favorable interest rates, and support California's economy with additional construction jobs. Chair Carney, that concludes our presentation, and we welcome the board's comments and feedback.
Thank you very much for your presentation and for your, as usual, excellent staff report that we received in our board book. So I do not see any members of the board wishing to ask questions or comment on this item. If you do, please raise your hand. All right, I still do not see any. So I have one question. I appreciate very much your discussion about things which, events and circumstances which might change our capital needs, such as post-COVID-19 changes to our instructional model, greater use of summer enrollment, and that sort of thing. Could you please explain to me where we have flexibility in this capital plan to adjust changes that might come up from those or from other sources?
Thank you, Trustee.
I'm sorry, Vi, I was just going to say I'm going to turn it over to you to go ahead and address that.
Thank you, Steve. Sorry to step on you there. The primary area that we have is under infrastructure improvements. So that is a system-wide program, and on attachment A it is the first priority in the list of projects. So that area gives us the greatest flexibility. Not only do campuses have specific projects that they request, but the system, so the Chancellor's Office has some placeholder projects under system-wide that we will we identify as potential needs to give us some latitude to modify projects and add projects as they come along. So we have under system-wide HVAC and electrical upgrades, a placeholder at 60 million, life safety / security solutions at 100 million, critical infrastructure at 60, and seismic evaluations at 20. So we have room to modify those dollar amounts and add different elements, but that is a great area of flexibility. And Department of Finance has been very good about allowing us to make substitutions on campus projects as well.
Excellent, thank you. Trustee Reynes.
Hi, I just had a question regarding this topic and some of the public comments that were made. When it comes to the electrical and upkeeping buildings, deferred maintenance, how would this affect jobs? Do we already have enough people working those jobs to do the maintenance, or would we need more people? Would those people be contracted out?
The majority of this work is contracted out, Trustee Raines. There are some projects, especially utility projects, where there are some dollars of a project that goes towards campus staffing. For example, if we have to have a utility shut down and coordinate work between a contractor and the outside campus. But some of the work is difficult for in-house staff because of the equipment that's ordered and say elevator equipment. So there's a challenge in matching the skill set between the routine maintenance and the life cycle changes in upgrading a building or infrastructure. But we have tried to support positions with the apprenticeship program, with dollars in the capital and deferred maintenance, but it really does vary on the type of project and the extent of work to be done.
Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Fagan.
We heard some pretty heartbreaking stories this morning from public comment on job losses and what it means to individuals, even though they've been doing good jobs and relevant. Could you talk a little bit about why the funds, even though they're scaled back for capital improvements and deferred maintenance and things, why this isn't the same pie and why some of these resources really can't be shifted over to helping retain some of those jobs?
I think it's really primarily the type of project. So as I mentioned, if it's a large roofing project that is not necessarily the expertise of some of our campus staff, certainly they could do painting on an interior remodel if that was what the campus selected. But it really is a matter of prioritization and whether the campus staff has a skill set and the time to support the project. And with the deferred maintenance funding from the state, there has historically been more of a limitation on the use of in-house staff. But with the CSU financing and use of reserves, it has given us a little bit more of latitude.
Yes, there was.
This is Tim. I think Doug's question also was about sort of the colors of money that support this kind of work versus supporting operations. Could you speak to that piece a little bit?
Thanks, Jim. That is right.
Right. I think that with the colors of money, so the deferred maintenance money is from the state, and it has one set of rules, which typically has not allowed us to hire in-house staff. Whereas if we were using CSU reserves for a project, we have greater latitude to hire CSU staff. So it varies on the color of money for the type of project. Does that help answer your question?
Could I, perhaps Trustee Fagan, I could add as well. The presidents of the 23 campuses, and we've had a lot of discussions of this, are very, very focused at doing everything they can to save jobs on the campus. Given a $300+ million cut that was taken, I can tell you that each of the presidents deeply is hurt when they have to lose any staff because of these budget cuts. So, what they're trying to balance is maintaining this capital program as meager as it is right now. They're hitting the very top priorities, but I think a lot of the actions that the presidents have taken in terms of using reserves, in terms of cost cutting, such as position freezes, freezing travel, freezing a lot of things, has prevented more job loss. And I think if you look at the size of the budget hit that we took, while every single job that's been lost has been painful, the number of jobs lost is relative to the size of that budget cut is still a fairly small percentage. So I can assure you that the presidents and their cabinets, their leadership team, are looking very creatively at ways of both cost cutting and the careful use of reserves when it's appropriate to protect as many jobs as possible.
Thank you, Steve. Doug, does that answer your question?
Yes. To as great a degree as we can. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I see no other hands raised. So before we adjourn, I would just like to publicly thank Steve Relier, Robert Eaton, and others in Steve's shop for their excellent work on maintaining our bond credit rating. That is why we can get these low interest rates from this last bond sale. And that enables us to use our public dollars to a much greater extent for good internal purposes. So thank you very much for your expertise and your great work on that. And that, Madam Chair, ends the meeting of the Committee on Campus Planning, Buildings, and Grounds.
Thank you, Jane. And I want to echo that. Thank you. That is so important. And you've done a great job in maintaining our stable